when it comes to doing media, there's no better expert than Fred Edwards. You'll find out soon. So you can take the information to your groups because it's invaluable. So I would like to welcome everybody to the Executive Director of the United Coalition of Reason, my friend, Fred Edwards.
All right, I'm not going to be standing up here behind this microphone the whole time. Now, what we can do is let's turn turn the lights up on me, that bottom thing.
Good.
That's good.
Good.
That'll do for now, and then let's advance that back one slide so we have a blank screen. And okay. That'll do for now, and then we're going, now don't play with the lights anymore, because there's a certain way I've got them set up. What?
They're back here.
Well, you don't need them on in the back, and it'll be too many lights to turn down.
You're not going to be able to see the screen, though.
Yeah, we want to see the screen, so I already set the lights up pretty much the way I wanted them. All right. So there'll be plenty of time when I'm standing out here and talking to you and so on. Now this is going to be a training session, and we're going to go on for a couple of hours, and I'm going to have a break in the middle. This is a how-to seminar in which we're going to have a number of things. We're going to have PowerPoint, videos, and handouts. And I've got some people who are going to help me with handouts. And who are the people who are going to help me with handouts? Okay, well, the people who are going to help me with handouts, take those two piles of handouts there that are on the desk there and hand them out. What I'm going to give you right now is just some general information on the United Coalition of Reason, the organization I represent. Part of the work we do is to help form local coalitions of groups and then give them media training and launch them with a media campaign, with a publicity stunt that lets people know that all the local groups in the area exist. So what I do is I go around the country, find all the local groups in a given media market, and get them working together with each other cooperatively. And then we create a website for that coalition of local groups. And that website is what we publicize. That website creates a kind of one-stop shopping for all the local groups of our ilk in the local area. So people then can find you. Also, they can't find you if they don't know you exist. So we do a publicity campaign using the website URL so that people then go to that website and find all the local groups in the area and realize that there's different types of groups for different kinds of people. We're not all alike. We may think similarly on the God question, but then after that we start diverging. And so some of us are humanists, some are ethical culturists, some want to do parenting for secular people, some want to have just social activities, drinking skeptically, things like that. Others want to do fun parties and so forth. Some want to have intellectual lectures and discussions. Others want to build a real community. What we want to say to those in our audience is that there's a number of different types of groups for you to meet your needs in this local area. And here's where to find us. Our media campaigns are like popping a balloon in a crowded room. They make everybody look. And then when everybody looks, we show them where to go. Here's where the website is. That's the name of the game. That's what the United Coalition of Reason does. But we do other things too. At conventions like this, we do trainings. We train in how to do fundraising, how to better organize your group, and how to do media work like this. Because part of our aim is to professionalize our movement. And for this, the United Coalition of Reason charges nothing. All I do when I go around the country is I meet with groups to get them into coalitions and then try to get them to let me give them money so I can help them launch a campaign. Wow. It's the easiest job I've ever had. Now, we have a microphone set up here in front because this is going to be interactive. Some of you have had some experience doing media work in your local area, and I'm going to invite you to come up, and I may not name you, sometimes you'll just want to, as the spirit moves, come up and speak in the microphone and share some things. If you have questions during this training seminar, I want you to raise your hands and interrupt me. It's okay. Don't interrupt me to argue, interrupt me to find out stuff. I'm going to cover effective publicity stunts, writing press releases, how not to look stupid on Bill O'Reilly, and other useful techniques so that you can go out there and do media work and plan media campaigns and not have to worry about all of the things that people often worry about when they start doing these things. And the thing that makes all of this work so easily, and believe me, doing this kind of promotion of our cause that we share is surprisingly easy. Easier than you thought. And here's why. I've been in this movement a long time. I actually go back to the late 1960s. Now, in the late 1960s, this is before the time of some of you, you want to publish an atheist book? You couldn't even go to one of those vanity houses where you pay to have them publish your book for you and have them take your money and publish an atheist book. They wouldn't accept your manuscript. These are people who just do it for the money. They accept all manuscripts, right? Well, they didn't accept manuscripts from atheists and other groups that are now accepted. If you wanted to write gay erotica, nope, nobody was going to publish your book. But look how the world has changed. In 2004, the dam broke with the rise of what the media called the new atheism. All of these books were coming out, and the scene changed until finally you were able to buy books of our type, not just in bookstores, not just online, no longer sent in a plain brown wrapper. You could get them in airport bookstores. You know you've arrived when you can have your works found in airport bookstores. Not only that, but a lot of the national organizations had run media campaigns and had put themselves on the map. But what about local groups? In a lot of local areas around the country, they still weren't used to this idea of folks like us. Because folks like us are still controversial. We're not so controversial as to be beyond the pale, like we were back in the 1960s. And we're not so mainstreamed that we're no longer interesting. For example, there was a time when just being gay was controversial. There was a time when being an interracial couple was controversial. Or being transgender was controversial. You could get airtime just for being one of those individuals or being in such a relationship. Well, we're at the stage now where we get airtime just for being who we are. We're at that point. That's known as the sweet spot. All you have to do is say, we're here, we're godless, get used to it. And people notice you. I was being told during this conference that someone had tried to put an ad on a bus that just said the simple word atheist and got the ad turned down. Okay, so just standing up and saying, hey, this is how I feel. So many people want to say, well, first of all, you shouldn't exist, you godless people. You shouldn't exist. And if you do exist, you shouldn't tell anyone about it. All right? Well, the role of the United Coalition of Reason is to say, we're here. We're going to tell you about it. We're getting organized. That ought to scare them. But we're not here to proselytize, which is the thing they're really afraid of. I'm not against proselytizing atheism. It's just that's not what we do. What we do is we reach out and find others of like mind and get them into these local groups and into these coalitions. We want to be found. We want to be noticed. That's it. And I once got a letter of complaint from someone who didn't like one of our billboard campaigns. Says, you're just trying to get attention. Yeah. That's what we're trying to do. So we're in that sweet spot now. And since we're in that sweet spot where the mere mention of who we are is enough to get us airtime, we need to strike while the iron is hot, because the day will come when this is no longer a big deal. And then we're going to have to come up with something else to do. All right, but we're not there yet. All right, so I'm first going to give you a little bit of a history of billboard campaigns, but let me tell you the first thing that's important to remember about billboard campaigns. And that is, billboards are a lousy form of advertising. You cannot convince anyone of anything on a billboard. People have said, oh, you're trying to convert people with your billboards. On one radio talk show, I was challenged with that, and I says, oh yeah, this is a big worry. Oh no, there goes my faith on a passing bus. Because we had two lines of text on the side of a passing bus. And like, this is going to change someone's religion? Your religion's in pretty weak shape if that's all it takes to change it. No, we're reaching out to people who already agree with us. We're just reaching out to our existing audience. So that's the purpose of our campaigns. All right, so fine, let's go to the first slide. It stands out. That's good enough. And now I can see my notes, so we're perfect. We are perfect in an imperfect world. All right, the first billboard of the current trend in billboards went up October 2nd, 2007 in Madison, Wisconsin. It was put up by the Freedom from Religion Foundation. This billboard garnered a lot of attention, not just because of its message. I mean, someone sees that and it's not going to like change their life, okay? But when you issue it with a press release, then it gets attention because more people see the billboard in the news, on TV. They hear about it on radio. They see pictures of it in the newspaper. More people see the billboard that way than on the highway. And so you see, these billboards are not advertising. They are publicity stunts. And not only did this billboard get a lot of publicity, it later went on to win the 2008 Addy Silver Award of the American Advertising Federation, which means that not only is this an effective billboard, it's an award-winning billboard. All right, next slide. All right, and the Freedom from Religion Foundation then went on at the 2008 Democratic and Republican National Conventions to put up billboards like this. Again, getting attention for the message, but it isn't going to change minds. It's going to let people know that this idea is out there and maybe get more people to vote their conscience on that particular issue during the election. Next slide. Well, now we come to Philadelphia and the Philadelphia Coalition of Reason, or Philly-Core. Now, on the National Day of Reason, May 1st, 2008, this billboard went up near the airport. Let's see, was it on? No, it was on the main highway, 95. Okay, here in the Philadelphia area. A press release was issued, and this was the launching of the Philadelphia Coalition of Reason. This was the pilot project to find out if this idea of forming local groups together into one coalition and then having a coalition website that was advertised and a coalition phone number that was advertised on the billboard would work. And that was what started the whole idea of these local coalitions of reason. And it not only showed that this would work, but it meant it was the beginning of the opportunity then to export this revolution all over the country. So the United Coalition of Reason hadn't yet been formed. This was just the Philadelphia Coalition of Reason. What's interesting and what makes these publicity stunts work so well isn't just that they get noticed, but they get reacted to. Next slide. The Lighthouse of Oxford Valley. It says Experience God. You can't see it completely. But their billboard had a blue sky background, and the billboard you just saw had a blue sky background. So they thought that since their billboard and our billboard were up the road a piece from each other, they thought that our billboard was mocking their billboard. And so their minister at their church gave a sermon against these atheists running a billboard in mockery of their billboard. And one of the church ladies, I was working for the American Humanist Association at the time, and we were helping with this project of launching Philly-Core. And this lady wrote an email to me and said, well, I think it's very interesting that you mocked our billboard with your billboard. And I said, no, that was not our purpose. We didn't even know about your billboard. We just rented some billboard space. But she mentioned her minister's sermon. I said, send me a copy of that. So she sent me a copy of it. And I sent it to the organizer of Philly Corps, the coordinator. And she then got together with the minister and the other leaders of that church, and they combined their efforts together, next slide, in a food bank project. And so here you see the people from the Lighthouse Group. And there you see Margaret Downing from Philly Corps, and then Lighthouse and Philly Corps and Lighthouse. The coalition, by being a collection of groups, was able to put as many boots on the ground as this church was able to. Same number of people working together, issue a press release on this. So here, Philly Corps was, oh, these bad atheists proclaiming their atheism, how awful. And then, oh, you mean you work with religious people to do good deeds? Man bites dog. That was another story. So pushback helps. And if you take advantage of opportunities when they come your way, you have another publicity opportunity. And that's what this did. It created a chance to reverse the image. That first, we were the bad guys. And then all of a sudden, we were the good ecumenical atheists. And as a result, got both those messages out there and thus got a more complete image of the groups in the area. Next slide. All right, well, meanwhile, while all of this was going on, in Washington, D.C., it was July, and the American Humanist Association was thinking ahead to the winter holiday season because the religious right was proclaiming there was a war on Christmas. And so the American Humanist Association thought, well, if they think there's a war on Christmas, let's give them one. We'll have some kind of campaign during the winter holiday season. It's bound to attract some attention. We wanted to rent billboard space, but billboards in Washington, D.C. have been outlawed, so there were no billboards that could be done. So we thought, all right, let's try bus ads. But we couldn't come up with a good slogan idea for the bus ads we wanted to run. And then something happened. Next slide. In October of 2008, the British in London, seeing ads like this on their buses, and other ads that said you're doomed to hell and so forth if you don't believe in Jesus, they wanted to respond to that in some way. So they announced the Atheist Bus Campaign. Next slide. And their slogan was, there's probably no God, now stop worrying and enjoy your life. Now, they were worried, laws being in Britain being a little different than ours, they weren't sure they could get away with saying there's no God. So they made it more agnostic, so there's probably no God. So they got approval for running their ads. Now this was in, as I said, October 2008. All they did was announce that they were going to do this. And the excitement and media that generated went worldwide, and they raised 120,402 pounds sterling, which is about $180,000 US, in 1 month. They were planning to run the ads in London. They ended up with enough money to run them all over Great Britain. And they raised all that money before putting a single ad on a single bus. So the American Humanist Association thought, that's a great slogan. And since you're not going to run it, and they weren't planning to run it until mid-January of 2009, we thought, all right, now that leaves a big media gap in there. From October to January, people are going to forget the story. You need to beef it up some. So why don't you let the American Humanist Association run your ads in the United States, in the Washington, D.C. area, in November and December? They said, well, we'd rather you not. So the American Humanist Association had to come up with its own slogan. We put a committee together, we threw ideas around, and we came up with this one. Next slide. Well, I believe in a God. Just be good for goodness' sake. And we thought that would be interesting, and it would attract attention, and it sure worked. Not only that, but we had another version of it to go with it, next slide, to show that we weren't asking a serious question. We weren't asking, send in your reasons why I believe in a God. We show a guy shrugging his shoulders. It's a rhetorical question. Just be good for goodness sake. Ran the ads, and it attracted attracted national attention. This is the ad campaign that got me on Bill O'Reilly, and I will be showing you the Bill O'Reilly video shortly. And at the same time that this generated a lot of attention nationwide, the religious right echo chamber beat the war on Christmas drum, and the American Humanist Association's phone lines were just deluged with calls, most of them coming, by the accents of the callers, from the South. We were in D.C. Nobody in D.C. really gets that excited about this stuff. In Washington, D.C., there's all kinds of campaigns and protests and so on. And in fact, one TV station went around and did an on-the-street interview, showed them pictures of the ad and said, well, what do you think of this? And most of them, they didn't care. They didn't see it as controversial. A lot of them were atheists anyway. And so there wasn't a big reaction on the street in D.C., but there was a media reaction, but there was no popular reaction to it. Yet, all around the country, there was this big reaction because the religious right beat the drum about this and got all their people to call in and send nasty emails and so on saying, may all of your atheist buses break down, and things like that. But that was all right, because we wanted the attention. This is a national organization trying to get national attention by running ads in one city, Washington, D.C., and it worked beautifully. In fact, we got some nice pushback. There was this stay-at-home Catholic mom who ran this ad. Next slide. Why believe? Because I created you and I love you, for goodness sake. Signed, God. Well, I went on a radio talk show opposite this woman, and we had a nice dialogue, and she said she favored the idea of free discussion and all viewpoints being on the buses, and she just wanted to be sure her viewpoint got on the bus, like no one had ever heard it before. I suggested that, since she was quoting God there, that maybe that quote was ghost written. But had a little fun with that. All right. Well, finally, the atheist campaign, the atheist bus campaign, the British Humanist Association did launch in January 2009. Next slide. And there's Ariane Shireen, who is the comedy writer who came up with that slogan. And so they launched it then. Next slide. Richard Dawkins helped fund it. There he is at the grand opening of their bus campaign and their publicity effort there and their media event. And they even got a protest campaign in response to theirs. Next slide. There definitely is a God, so join the Christian party and enjoy your life. We like pushback because every time that gets publicity, they hark back, they mention the campaign that they're responding to. And this is the trick about getting publicity. Do not respond to stuff they do. Make them respond to stuff you do. That's the name of the game. Next slide. The United Coalition of Reason was founded in February 2009. We launched with the Dallas-Fort Worth Coalition of Reason on March 30th. And then, some months later, we launched the campaign in Iowa. Now, in Iowa at the time, in Des Moines, Iowa, there was only one group, Iowa Atheists and Freethinkers. So we couldn't build a coalition there. So we did not pay for this ad, but we designed it for them and we did the public relations. So they put this ad up on buses, taking visitors to the state fair. Now here's the importance of putting it on buses tied in with a big event like that. Again, we didn't really care for getting people into Iowa Atheists and Freethinkers. We really weren't trying to get them from all over Iowa. We really were only trying to get them from the Des Moines area. But people were coming into town from all over Iowa. And that meant the people in Des Moines were thinking, oh my goodness, what are all these visitors from out of town going to think of our fair city if they ride on a bus with this message taking them to the state fair? And that's what caused a big stir. As a result, a number of people complained to the bus company about the bus ads. So the bus company took the ads down. So we got the first round of publicity just putting the ads up. When the bus company took the ads down, a second round of publicity we didn't even ask for. Then I called up the Iowa ACLU. I said, talk to these people. They talked to the bus company caved, the ads went right back up. Third round of publicity, 3 times the publicity because of pushback. Pushback is wonderful stuff. You don't have to make it happen, it often happens by itself. Because you see, from a legal perspective, they can say, we won't run bus ads that promote ideas. We won't run bus ads that are religious or non-religious. We won't run any idea ads. We will just run ads selling products and services. They can do that. But once they let religious ads on the buses or the trains or any kind of public transit that's owned by government, they cannot engage in content discrimination or viewpoint discrimination. And so we had them, and they had to put those ads back up. So 3 times the publicity just because of the complaints. You can't pay for this stuff. It comes free. Next slide. All right, well, not only do our billboards attract lots of attention, like we did here for the San Diego Coalition of Reason, but as you can see by the folks there posing in front of the billboard, how proud they are, there's a reason. Because billboards like this are a catalyst of local morale. They are morale builders. They are a shot in the arm. They excite the local groups. And they also, when these groups get involved in a coalition and then have a big campaign like this and get noticed, it sometimes causes more groups to form. Not only the existing groups to grow larger, but to grow more active and more groups to form. So as a morale builder within our movement, these billboards are also very powerful. So they're great for public relations as publicity stunts. They're great for morale builders. I still do not recommend billboards as advertising. All right, next slide. All right, now, we ran 10 billboards in Sacramento, California, shortly after that. That was actually in 2010. San Diego was toward the end of 2009. In 2010, in February, we ran 10 billboards in Sacramento. Now, why 10? Well, you see, if you buy one of those big highway, big interstate billboards, you might spend $5,000. But sometimes for the same money, certainly in the Sacramento market, these smaller type billboards, we were able to get 10 of those. They're called posters. They're smaller size. They're closer to the ground and therefore easier to vandalize. And so millions are also lost. Somebody put that on there. We issued a press release in response to the vandalizing saying, see, this shows how important our message is. Whenever you get pushback, you issue another press release to rub it in and get more publicity for your effort. You play on it. Well, that happened. Next slide. So somebody else then tried to graffiti another billboard, and they ran out of spray paint, but gave us another opportunity to talk to the media about it. Next slide. And then this billboard totally went down, just totally torn down. Well, we were told by some local gas station owner nearby, well, it was rather windy last night. We think this one was an act of God. But we got media publicity for it, regardless of who was responsible. Next slide. All right, then we ran a bus ad campaign in Detroit. Don't believe in God, you are not alone, all right? Some people tore off the don't on a couple of the bus ads, so we ran a press release on that with this photograph. This photograph was provided by the bus company for us. You always, with bus ads, you always order extras anyway, because sometimes they get muddy or dirty or something like that, and they have to replace them anyway, so it's no big deal. It's no big deal if this happens. But we make a big deal out of it because this is all about public relations. Next slide. All right, then Northeast Florida Coalition of Reason. That was in the Jacksonville, St. Augustine area. We put 3 billboards up in that area. This one, although we didn't order it in this location, the billboard company said, oh, there was some mix-up or something, and the really primo location we wanted, we didn't get, and we ended up getting put out in the sticks with this one here. Well, this actually worked to their disadvantage and our advantage because sometime in the night this happened. It became a Cinerama screen, if you remember Cinerama, because somebody with a truck apparently tried to push it down, but the trees in back kept it from going all the way down. So you could still read the message clearly, but you could see it was vandalized. So, wow, we really issued a press release on that, got lots of attention. Not only that, but they damaged the billboard structure enough that the billboard company lost that billboard. They ended up packing it up and hauling it away, and there's no more billboard in that location, and so therefore we did our bit to beautify America by removing billboards. Next slide. All right, now, here was a situation I didn't think about, that sometimes they have these double billboards, all right? And you order the billboards, you don't always know they're a double billboard, or if you're not reading this fine print, you don't see it. And this one was for a church that was nearby. And so we played off of this and said, see, we can coexist peacefully with religious people. So we played that angle. Next slide. All right, then in North Carolina, the North Carolina Secular Association, in the summer of 2010, they came up with this idea of a billboard campaign, One Nation, Indivisible. And at first I was skeptical if this was going to work. I said, well, you know, some people might not notice that you know anything in particular about it. But I was wrong about that. And of course, if you spell it out in the press release, it makes everybody aware, and that's what was done. And I helped them with their press release. I said, you really do have to spell out what you're doing here. And so that was done. So this was a billboard being put up, so it didn't take long. Next slide. And someone thought they would put in what they thought was the missing bit of material and provide a little editing there. This particular billboard, by the way, went up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the main drag in Charlotte happens to be called Billy Graham Parkway. So they blamed us, or blamed them actually, for having gone out of our way to put it up on Billy Graham Parkway. But in fact, that was just the main drag, you know. Didn't even have to think twice about it. That's where it went. But they said, oh, you're defaming our favorite evangelist. Next slide. And they came out with a counter billboard campaign, One Nation Under God, WeStillPray.com. Again, whenever that billboard was mentioned, the earlier billboard was mentioned, pushback is great stuff. Next slide. Then in this event here, the October March to Restore Sanity and/or Fear by Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert in Washington, D.C., this was when we decided to launch the Washington, D.C. Coalition of Reason, or Washington Corps, and we did it, next slide, using bus shelters. Don't believe in God? Join the club. We introduced our new slogan there, and put those right around the National Mall so that people going to the National Mall would see these ads, and we publicized them in connection with that event and got publicity for the launch of Washington Corps. Next slide. And here we were at the time that people were rallying. That's me in the center. We were holding up this Coalition of Reason sign so that all of our people from the Washington Coalition of Reason could gather together, and we all marched together, 2, 4, 6, 8, separate church and state, you know, chanting as we went to participate. So we used it as an opportunity to get some more attention for our viewpoint. We carried literature with us and so on. Next slide. Then this happened. This is the biggest one. On November 30, 2010, Fort Worth. Now, we'd already launched the Dallas-Fort Worth Coalition of Reason, but this time, on their own dime, they decided they wanted to run bus ads of their own. So they came up with this idea of an American flag background, saying millions of Americans are good without God. Now, that American flag background was made up of photos of real atheists taken at the Texas Free Thought Convention that's held every year. So at the convention leading up to this plan, they took all of these pictures and people agreed to have their picture on this ad, and people were very proud. Oh, I'm, you know, row 4, you know, picture 5, you know, whatever. And there they all were on this ad. Now, I said to them, you know, this is kind of hard to read. This is a little bit of a busy ad. I wouldn't have designed it this way. They said, well, this is what we're going with. And I said, all right. And they were paying for it. I helped them with the publicity. I helped them get their press release out. I wrote their press release for them. They could only afford to put it on 4 buses. All right? 4 lousy buses. A hard-to-read ad on 4 lousy buses. It led a bunch of churches in the area to launch a bus boycott for the length of the time this ad would be up. For 4 weeks, this ad was going to be up So they said, we're gonna have carpooling and we're gonna take you to work so you don't have to ride accidentally one of those 4 buses in a fleet of like 150. You won't have to do it. They protested first, said if you put those ads up, because these were announced in advance, so if you put those ads up, we will have a bus boycott. The bus company person came out and said, we can't discriminate, we have to run the ads. So they did their bus boycott. Now, the Fort Worth Bus Company has one of the lowest riderships in the nation. All right, so it's like if you don't ride the buses, it isn't going to make that big of a difference because they're already losing money. But all of this publicity, 4 ads, a bus boycott, tons of publicity in the paper. This just went on for all 4 weeks. Not only that, they had city council meetings about it and all of this. Furthermore, a lot of other Christian groups got involved. And they decided they were going to launch their protests. And so they ran counter bus ads. And we got publicity from that. But the best one of all was this one. Someone hired a billboard truck to follow one of those buses around all over town to give the other side. Because, of course, the other side never gets heard. So there they were, saying, I still love you, signed God, another ghost-written bit of text. So this was this was astonishing. And not only that, then they later held a city council meeting and they decided we're not going to allow religious or non-religious or any ideological ads on the buses in Fort Worth anymore, forevermore. So not only that, we shut down all religious advertising on Fort Worth buses after that. Next slide. All right. So meanwhile, in New York City, going on at the same time, Dave Silverman, American Atheist, they decided they'd do their War on Christmas thing. So at the Lincoln Tunnel, on one side of the Lincoln Tunnel, they put up, you know it's a myth. This season, celebrate reason, American Atheist, reasonable since 1963. Pretty wordy, but that's okay, because it isn't what you see when driving by, it's what you read about in the paper. They got tons of media attention for this that went nationwide. You probably remember it. And the Catholic League put up a big ad on the other end of the Lincoln Tunnel in response to this. So again, it gave American Atheists tons more publicity because the Catholic League put up their ad. And this became so famous that people could even recognize it when it was parodied in an editorial cartoon. Next slide. Republicans stand for fiscal responsibility. You know it's a myth. And there's a guy from the Tea Party praying to the billboard.
I like the revolutionary.
So, yes, there we go. All right, next slide. Okay, now, among the things that the United Coalition of Reason does is that we not only do the billboards, but we provide banners and things based on the billboard that people can display in their exhibit booths. Because this is another way to get lots of publicity, is to set up a booth at street fairs and festivals. Particularly street fairs and festivals where you might not ordinarily be, or county fairs or someplace where a lot of the people who might not agree with you will be. You can get news coverage sometimes for doing that. And even if you don't get news coverage, you get a lot of attention at the street fair. So you set up a booth. And people come around and they ask questions, they want to know about it. And it turns out there's a lot more people out there who already agree with you. And if you only had a booth set up, it would be great. So we paid for their tent, we paid for their banner, and now they've got the equipment they need to do stuff in street fairs year after year. We paid for their first street fair, and then the local coalition can pay for its own street fairs after that. So we encourage groups to do this. This was at a Pride Festival. Pride festivals, Pride parades, some of them march in Pride parades. Next slide. Here's an example, a Triangle Coalition of Reason in North Carolina. They were marching in the Pride parade. Next slide. Okay, now the Freedom from Religion Foundation, meanwhile, got quite imaginative in their billboards, doing a kind of a warm, friendly, family-friendly kind of style of billboard. Another happy humanist family. We put our faith in science. I'm saved from religion. You know, all kinds of things like that, showing people of all different types of backgrounds. And they invited people to come forward and put their faces on a billboard. This is part of their effort to get more people to come out. If you can get more ordinary people to come out and show that ordinary people are coming out, it will then improve our image in the community. Because you see, we're not really threatening. We're not really scary. It's just that we're different. And if people realize that we're everywhere, that you can find us, we're your friends, your neighbors, your co-workers, that we go to your places of entertainment, your places of work and school and so on, that we're to be found wherever you go, then just like with the gay rights movement, people will get used to the idea and it will normalize it. So it's very important to do these kinds of things. Next slide. All right, then we were going to run this bus ad in Little Rock, Arkansas. We wanted to do it at the River Fest, which was held in Little Rock, Arkansas every year, and we wanted to put it on the buses that take people to the River Fest. We thought that would be great. But the bus company refused us. So we had our lawyers talk to them, and they still refused us. So we thought, all right, we can't let this go on. Not only is it important that our message get across and that people not shut us down, but it's also important as a civil liberties kind of advocacy, as a social service activity, that it's important that we stand up and fight for the right of all people, even people with whom we disagree, to express their views, and that public transit may not engage in viewpoint discrimination against anybody. And so it's important to sue them just for that reason of promoting civil liberties, let alone promoting our own interests. So we wanted to put these ads up. They said no. So what we did was on June 1st, 2011, yes, I want to make sure I got my year right. Yes, we filed suit in federal court in Little Rock, Arkansas. So we didn't get our ads up right away. We just filed suit. Well, guess what filing suit does? It gets you publicity. All right? It works. We got tons of publicity. Well, we were able to push for an early hearing in court, and so on August 11th, we got our day in court, and we sent out a media advisory telling the media that this was the courthouse that the case was going to be heard in, this is the exact courtroom, this was the time it was going to start, and that the judge was likely to rule from the bench. So the media was out there in droves, and the judge ruled in our favor and ordered the bus company to run our ads. And so they all come out on the courthouse steps afterwards, and our lawyers are interviewed, and they say things, and then the lawyers for the other side, they cry in their beer about how they shouldn't have lost. But here's the funny thing. Their primary argument was that if we run these bus ads on the buses in Little Rock, Arkansas, some Christian terrorist may firebomb the bus on which the ad appears. And so the bus company needed to protect itself, not from atheists, from Christian terrorists. And we unearthed, we did a Freedom of Information Act request and got all of this internal correspondence that they'd had about this. And we exposed it all in the media. And it was actually embarrassing to Christians what these lawyers were trying to say to keep our ads off the buses, that they were really defaming the Christian community in Little Rock, Arkansas. Well, so that was our second round of publicity when we won our case. And since we won our case, we got to run our ads. So that gave us a third round of publicity. And it turns out that the people in the Central Arkansas Coalition of Reason in Little Rock are creative people. They have a kickball team, and their kickball team, if you know anything about kickball, it's not a real sport. It's like baseball, but you kick the ball, and you run around the bases carrying a beer can, and you wear funny outfits, and you do goofy things. So they had a kickball team, and they called it the Nonprofits. P-H-R-O-P-H-E-T-S. P-R-O-P-H-E-T-S. All right, so they called the Nonprofits. Well, they invited Fox News out. Now, I want to tell you something about local Fox News. Fox is your friend,
Yes.
all right? Local Fox News is your friend. They are not the ideologues at national Fox News.
Right.
They're just a local TV station, and a lot of atheists work for Fox News if they can't get a job with CBS, NBC, or ABC. So they will work, because they're in journalism, they want a gig, they will work for Fox News. So we have lots of friends at Fox News. But Fox News is the culture war channel. They love our stories. So we gave them a story. We gave them the kickball story. Next slide. And so here they are, dressed in buses with the bus ads, kicking the ball. They're the nonprofits. You see there, that was their logo at the top there that I put there. And the Fox News came out and they showed them playing the kickball and running around the bases with these bus things on as their uniforms for that game. And it gave the leader, the coalition coordinator, a chance to speak to the media and give a teachable moment about civil liberties and the importance of freedom of speech and freedom of expression and freedom of religion and the right of atheists to speak out and be heard. And so this was just a day before the buses rolled out with our ads. So we got tons of publicity, in part due to the creativity of our local people. So you want to be creative. Next slide. All right, so then in Columbia, South Carolina, here we rented a digital billboard. We've done those, where you just get a portion of the ad space. So I think we ordered 2 segments, so it would cycle through twice. So, of course, what do you think? A Christian group comes along, next slide, and they rent another segment on the same billboard to say, we still believe in God and His Son, Jesus. And so, again, more publicity for our side. Next slide. Then, something happens in every year in Fredericksburg, Virginia. On early January, they have Religious Freedom Day. And it happens to be run by the Knights of Columbus. You see them all in their Captain Crunch outfits there. And so we entered the local Coalition of Reason in the parade. And this was the media photo. I mean, in fact, all the media attention that time was about our local coalition. It really wasn't about the usual stuff. In fact, they kind of become bored with this parade and festival leading up to that time. But then when they did the coverage that time, it was all about us.
You need better hats.
Yeah, we do. But
Strangers, co-winners.
yeah. All right, next slide. All right, then, leading up to the Reason Rally, I ran this ad in Virginia, and what's the name of that city in southern Virginia? It's near Petersburg. What am I thinking of? Fredericksburg. Not Fredericksburg, below Fredericksburg. No, not Roanoke. Richmond, Virginia. Celebrate Living Without God, the Reason Rally on National Mall. So I was on the Reason Rally committee for the advertising, and so we put this up, and this just generated tons of attention down there because they've never had billboards like this in Virginia. Next slide. Then, of course, there was a Reason Rally. Some of our groups came, like the Omaha Coalition of Reason. They brought their banner. There's me speaking at the Reason Rally, and the big crowds we had, 25, 35,000, however many were there. Lots of people on a rainy day. Yes. And so, opinions differ. I went out and counted 30,000, okay? I went out and counted, all right? But, you know, I mean, I take an evidence-based approach. But so do others. So, next slide. All right, now, one of the things that we do then is we try to get lots of publicity, as I said. And so here we were. We decided we would be a lion in a den of Daniels. All right, so we went to Corpus Christi, Texas, the body of Christ, and ran our billboards. And of course, this is the front page of the Caller Times. They couldn't say atheist. We say godless billboards, by the way, but they said agnostic billboards cause a stir. And so that was front page above the fold. We get a lot of this kind of publicity. But we got it also in Corpus Christi, Texas. Next slide. All right, and then in San Diego, our San Diego Coalition of Reason, which had done so well with their launch, They got together with American Atheists, and they came up with this interesting creative idea for a billboard with a positive image. Atheism, a personal relationship with reality. And it was a different kind of a message. It didn't have to poke a stick in your eye. It said something very positive and uplifting, and that got attention because it was something different and creative, and they designed it locally, and I thought that was a great job. Next slide. All right, so now you can't see this that well because it's a little washed out, but this is an image from the website of the United Coalition of Reason. This is a map of the United States, and it shows all of our coalitions all over the country.
Great work.
Here's what's important about this. Okay, you can go to this page, and you can click on any one of these bright light bulbs here, and go to a coalition website, which will then list all the local groups in that coalition's area. So this is a conduit, a means by which an ordinary person just trying to find a group in their area can go to the United Core website, pick the light bulb nearest them, and find all the groups nearest them. But how do we get more people to know that this map exists? Next slide. Because once you go, like I said, you go to the local coalition, and here's our San Francisco one, and it lists the different groups: Center for Inquiry, San Francisco Atheist Fellowship of Humanity, which is an atheist church that's been around since the 1940s. All right? It's not a new idea. Next slide. All right. Well, we're going to advertise on Sirius XM radio, and we're going to run ads to direct people to our website to find that map. And we're going to say, we're here to tell atheists where to go. And then we're going to direct them where to find more people like themselves. We're going to attract attention. We're going to speak to our audience. We're not attacking religion. As you can see, we're reaching out to our own audience, getting them to come to our website. So we're going to be, next month, launching a big satellite radio campaign directing attention to the website, which will then direct attention to the local coalition websites, which will then direct attention to all the local groups in our local coalitions. Next slide. All right, we have a new campaign idea that we're about to work on. I'd like you to be thinking about this because this offers potential opportunities for you. We want to put a spotlight on injustice. Now, that's a Happy Humanist logo. It's kind of like the bat symbol. But if you know anything about light and physics, you know that the bat symbol doesn't work, okay? You'd have to have a big fog to be able to project it and have it see. You project that into the empty night sky, and it's going to disappear, all right? So it looks good on paper, it looks good in the comic books, doesn't really work. And by the way, how did Batman ever see the bat signal if he's down in his bat cave or in his mansion? And do they only signal him at night? I mean, this makes no sense. So the whole idea of the bat signal is like a lousy form of communication, especially when they had telephones. So that was dumb, okay? It's picturesque, so I'm using it. All right, we want to put a spotlight on injustice. And the way we want to do that is there are many kinds of injustices that happen to people like us that do not always violate the law. Next slide. All right, so now Jessica Alquist became famous because of all of the hostility directed against her when she challenged a prayer banner in her high school. But very often, people like us suffer injustices without there being a legal violation. Can we put a spotlight on injustice? If you know of injustice in your community, the United Coalition of Reason has a publicity stunt to help publicize your groups and put a spotlight on injustice. We'll come out there, we will hire spotlights, and we will set them up across the street or wherever, and we will draw attention to it. We will do press conferences, we will do publicity stunts around that. So if you know of injustices in your area and want to put a spotlight on it, then you can see me. Contact information for me is on the literature that was passed around. Next slide. All right, we have another problem. Churches. Lots of churches spend lots of money. One of the complaints that we get for our billboard campaigns is, why do you people spend thousands of dollars on billboards when there are starving children? We get that. Okay? Like, oh, you mean churches haven't been advertising before now? All right, well, here we see a megachurch because this is more important than feeding the starving. Look at the money spent on that. compared to what we spend on a billboard. Do you have any big, gross, egregious examples of this sort of thing in your community? Next slide. Here's the Crystal Cathedral, by Robert Schuller's Crystal Cathedral in California. That's just another example of the outrageous amounts of money that are spent on this sort of thing. Next slide. Not just Christianity. Here we have Mormonism. This is the Hill Cumorah pageant in Palmyra, New York, that the Mormons put on with the world's largest outdoor sound system. Next slide. And here's Prabhupada's Golden Palace in West Virginia, Wheeling, West Virginia. Again, a lot of money being spent on this. And lots of groups spend lots of money on their facilities. But there's another element. Next slide. And that is ministers sometimes live in lavish surroundings. Yes, this is a minister's house. All right? I am in the wrong damn business. All right, this is how they live. Next slide. That's a bedroom. All right? Next slide. And that's the swimming pool indoors. Indoor swimming pool. See, this is the kind of lavish wealth that people get for spreading nonsense.
Snow in the trees.
So, yes, look at this. So, is this too much for a man of poverty and goodness to be having? Next slide. And that's actually the end of it. Let's now turn up the lights. Somebody turn on one of those side switches, and I can talk to you about what we're doing here. So, what we want to do is, if you know of any of these egregious examples in your community, that we will help you publicize that, and we will again put the spotlight on that as well as a publicity stunt. So contact me again. Now, I've been talking a lot about publicity stunts, but how do you know if your idea for a publicity stunt is a good one? That's the big question in a lot of people's minds. Well, when I was first getting into doing this, I had a nice conversation with the public relations specialist for a Hispanic Unity organization. Now, you may think that all different types of Hispanics get along real well, but there are Mexicans and Argentinians and Costa Ricans and so on. And no, they don't all get along that well with each other. They see differences between each other. And so therefore, there's this Hispanic Unity organization that puts on big conferences and brings all these Hispanic groups together to talk and dialogue and so on. And this fellow was head of PR for that. And around the time that he came up with this PR stunt idea, there was this thing going on, you may remember it, called Hands Across America, in which people were going to hold hands from sea to shining sea. There was going to be a stretch of unbroken holding hands from sea to shining sea, and it was going to end war and bring world peace. All right, so just millions of people participated in this. There were a few breaks in the line in the deserts and the mountains and the wheat fields and a number of places. But anyway, they did it. It was a big deal, a big media event, Hands Across America. So this guy thought, what can I do for our Hispanic Unity organization? And he came up with this idea. And he thought, I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to talk to the board of directors about this. I'm not going to tell them. I'm just going to do it. He came up with this idea of getting everyone from that conference to come outside the hotel at the end of the conference and hold their hands around the hotel. Hands around the hotel. They formed a big circle of people all around the hotel. And he sent a media advisory to the media letting them know that this was going to happen. Helicopters covered it from way up high. Reporters were down below. How did it feel to be holding hands around the hotel? And all of this foolishness got tons of publicity. When he got done telling me that story, I said, all right, so how do you know if you have a good idea for a publicity stunt? And he said, if you are embarrassed to tell your friends and relatives about it. You really have to think outside the box. You have to be willing to think in patterns and categories that your board of directors probably would never come up with if they deliberated on it, and might not even be too willing to approve if you put it to them. Try not to put too many good ideas to a vote, because there's nothing like a committee to destroy a good idea. So keep that in mind. When the American Humanist Association came up with its publicity ideas, it was all done by staff, and it was all part of the effort, and we just went and we did it. And that's where the reaction was. We had to get permission of the president, because the president was going to be saying things about it. But beyond that, we didn't go to the board. We didn't run it through everybody's personal nervous system, because that's the way to drown a good idea. So you need to have a certain amount of freedom to act. And you need to be able to think in terms of what will catch the public's eye, what will catch their ear, what will get their attention, not what is philosophically pure. We really get tied down, all of us, into this philosophical purity. We want to speak the truth, we want to speak right, we want to use the right words, and these are important things for finding the truth and speaking it honestly and all of that. But in public relations, what you want to do is bait the hook and bring people to you where they will then learn the truth. All right? So you want to talk about our evidence-based approach? Have essays on your website. Have an information-rich website that has all kinds of information and ideas and essays and philosophizings. Get people to your meetings and have really good speakers who talk about all of this stuff and make the case for these ideas, because you can't get these ideas across in a soundbite. You can't get these ideas across on 2 sentences on the side of a passing bus. You can't get these ideas across on a highway billboard. You can't get them across on any of these other kinds of things. Think about how we began this conference Friday night with the Friday the 13th soiree. Now, come on, this isn't serious skepticism. Are there a lot of serious believers in the walking under ladders is going to be bad luck? No, not really. This is not a serious enterprise to refute this nonsense. But that isn't what it's for. It's for fun, and these are great for publicity. Years ago, when Paul Kurtz started doing these Friday the 13th soirees, I said to him, nobody really believes this stuff. What are you doing? And he says, the media won't come out for our serious stuff, but they'll come out for this because it's visual. And that's the key to a good publicity stunt. It needs to be visual. They want to do cameras. They want to put things on the screen. And now I'm going to show something next on the screen here as an example of that. And then after this, I'm going to show you a couple of short videos, and then we're going to take our only break. All right? So, yeah. So we'll get that. But I want to show you how effective it can be when you get something visual to the media and they publicize it. Okay, and this is the one, do the one that's Channel 10, Arizona. Yeah, it's not in the PowerPoint, it's one of the videos. It's the one that's called AZ10. And what we did was we launched a billboard in Phoenix, Arizona to launch the Arizona Coalition of Reason. And when we did this, we put it up near the airport, and we got all of the major TV stations to cover this when we put the billboard out. And I want you to notice, what I want you to notice in this video is the website URL on the billboard and how much attention it gets. Remember, we didn't have to pay for this advertising. We paid for the billboard, but if we'd have bought ads on TV, I don't think they would have been as effective as this news coverage was. Okay, not that one. That's Bill O'Reilly. That's right. Yeah.
That's the picture of the tides.
Tides going in, tides going out, yeah. Yeah, I've got 3 videos on there. Yeah, okay, now it's the one just right there. Click that one. Right that one. Okay. And then, now the sound's going to be kind of loud when it starts, but you'll adjust it accordingly. So go ahead and start that video. And again, pay attention to the web URL. Starting here.
Yay, Windows 8.
Okay, here we go. Turn up the, and yeah. Now turn up the sound.
You're watching Fox 10 Arizona Morning.
Welcome back on in here. Happy Friday. Thanks for being with us today. Yes, we made it to the end of the week, and a lot of you are going to be headed out for work here in the next couple of minutes. Driving to work this morning, though, you might notice a few attention-grabbing billboards around town. Yeah, there's this one in particular. It says, "Don't believe in God, you aren't alone," and it's causing quite a reaction. Yeah, Diane Ryan is live with more on this. Diane, you went out and talked to some people about it this morning, correct?
Hey, that's right, and the faithful are not happy about this. Take a look behind me. This is what we're talking about. A big sign with a question, "Don't believe in God?" Underneath it, "You're not alone." Now, it's right along 44th Street, just north of the Sky Harbor Airport. If you're going southbound on 44th Street, you can't miss this big blue and white sign. The American Humanist Association put up the sign. They are holding their 68th annual conference right here in Tempe at the Mission Palms Hotel all this weekend. Humanists are defined in the dictionary as either atheists or agnostics. Their association has put up signs in Denver, in Philadelphia, Dallas, Fort Worth, Chicago, Moscow, Idaho, New Jersey along the turnpike there, Charleston, South Carolina, and New Orleans. They say for all the talk about religion lately, the number of secular Americans is booming. So we were talking to drivers this morning to see what they have to say, and here's what they're saying.
I believe in Jesus Christ as my personal Savior.
What do you think about this sign on the freeway?
I didn't see it, but I don't think it's right. I don't agree with it at all.
It's their right to do it, I believe. They're free to have whatever freedom of speech.
I haven't seen it, but I don't really believe in God. So.
I think you can believe in whatever you want to believe in. I personally don't believe in God.
If they don't believe in God already, maybe that does make them feel okay.
Now, a woman talked to me off camera. She wouldn't say it on camera, but she says she plans to pray for the agnostics and the atheists. We live in a country where there's freedom of speech, and so this billboard should stay, whether you believe in it or not.
And Diane, did you say that this is the only one up in town, or there are more?
I think this is the only one in town for right now, and usually wherever they go and they put up a sign, it's usually just one, and it's in a very prominent place. 44th Street southbound goes right into the airport. It is a heavily used road, although some of the people that I talked to have not seen it yet. So we printed out what it looked like, a picture of the sign, so they could see what they were talking about. Not everyone got it. They thought it meant if you don't believe in God, something's wrong with you. In other words, you need to define God. But actually, that's not what the sign says. It says if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. It's okay not to believe in God.
Okay, well, Diane, thank you for that report. And in fact, it is...
All right, All right, now, we coincided the launch of Arizona Corps with the American Humanist Association National Conference that was being held in Tempe at the same time. So they got their stories a little bit mixed up because they launched it at the conference. But then we also launched, at the end of 2009, near the end of 2009, we launched a coalition in New York City called Big Apple Corps. And it got, well, New York City is New York City. I read about this story later on in the China Daily. It got covered all over the world, our New York launch. Here's Al Jazeera's coverage.
Take a ride on a New York subway. You'll find people of every race, creed, and color. And these days, a sign of one of the United States' fastest growing groups, one that doesn't identify with any religion.
I'm not a believer. We're so inundated with religious, right-wing fundamentalists and whatever, that we need that.
It's an ad campaign here and around the country meant to generate interest in atheism. The most recent survey of religious identification shows the number of Americans listing no religious affiliation has grown from 8 to 15%. The Coalition of Reason consists of a number of groups hoping to capitalize on what they see as growing disbelief in God.
I think starting at 9/11, people actually started to see some of the dangers of fundamentalist religion. And then follow that by 8 years of the Bush administration, which was so explicitly religious and openly religious in its reasons for, say, going to Iraq, that people were, in some degree, turned off by that open religiosity.
As well as the inauguration of President Barack Obama signaled a new era for atheists when he became the first president to mention them by name.
We are a nation of Christians and Muslims, Jews and Hindus, and non-believers.
Studies show the number of Americans who regularly attend a religious service is decreasing, while those who've never worshipped at all are increasing. Still, the United States remains the most religious country in the industrialized world.
Those who believe and study religion say it's not God, but the religious institutions that have lost their luster with Americans.
But that doesn't mean they're less spiritual or less religious. It's just that they're less attached to institutions. In the survey that some of the atheists cite about 1 million New Yorkers, they're not asked about their belief in God. They're asked about whether they participate in a religion. And some people have become more loosely affiliated.
Even in New York, the city of racy billboards, violent movies, and scantily clad women, reaction to the ads show that religious roots run deep.
I think it's sad.
I'm good with God, so I don't know, but if they're not good with God, then that's all right too, I guess.
Something keeps you going, whether it's God, Buddha, Jesus, whatever you call it, it's something that keeps you going, man.
We want to get all of these issues out onto the conversation table. We want people talking about it.
While religion may or may not be waning in the United States, even the atheists believe it will continue to be a force in society for some time to come. Kristen Salumi, Al Jazeera, New York.
All right. Now, I think while we've got this up and running, I think this would be a good time then. I mentioned the AHA bus ad campaign and how it got me on Bill O'Reilly. And so a lot of people worry, well, if you go on Bill O'Reilly, you know, I mean, is he going to shut you down? Are you going to do okay? It's a big worry. But if you plan out what you're there to say and then you deliver your message, you can do all right. And so, are we being shut down or? All right. Otherwise, we can try it later. But I wanted you to see then that what I want to train you in the second half of this session after we take our break is I want to teach you how you can go on TV and radio talk shows and handle yourself well. I want to show you how you can issue press releases and be effective. And it all has to do with planning. If you plan ahead properly, if you know what your talking points are, you know what your message is, you know what you're trying to get across, you know what you're there to say, and you have it all figured out in advance, then it doesn't matter what they do. It only matters that you use that as an opportunity, as a vehicle, as a launch pad to get your point across. And that's really the secret, the main secret, to dealing with someone like Bill O'Reilly or anyone else, is to be prepared and plan ahead and kind of know what you're walking into. And I have a number of handouts that I'm going to provide in the second half of this that is going to show you how you plan ahead, talk you through the planning stages, and then some of the pitfalls to avoid, some of the tricks, dirty tricks that interviewers will pull on you, and how to address those and how to handle them when that comes up. So that's the basic kind of down-to-earth training that I'm going to provide you with in the second half. So, yeah, it's right there. Bill O'Reilly, O'Reilly Factory. Oh, it's trying. Okay. Now, the interesting thing that you might note about this is that when I was on Bill O'Reilly, I was not with him. He was in New York and I was in Washington, D.C. So I was sitting in a dark room looking at a camera. They did a split scene thing, and I had an earphone so I could hear what Bill O'Reilly was saying. They asked me, would you like the monitor on? And I said, no. And here's why. Because if the monitor's on and it's sitting over there and you're looking over there to see how you look and then looking back at the camera and then looking at the monitor and looking back at the camera and at the monitor, What happens, looks like you're shifty-eyed. Looks like you're confused, you don't know what you're talking about. So I had the monitor left off, I looked straight at the camera for the split scene, and this is how it came out.
It's the time of the holiday season. A group called the American Humanist Association is spending about $40,000 to advertise against religion. A number of buses in Washington, D.C. will carry this ad: "Why believe in God? Just be good for goodness sake." Obviously not a pro-religion message. Joining us now from Washington, Fred Edwords, the Director of Communications for the American Humanist Association. Just be good for goodness sake, of course, from the song Here Comes Santa Claus. Santa Claus.
No, Santa Claus is coming to town.
All right, Santa Claus is coming to town. Santa Claus, of course, St. Nicholas, a saint, attached to the Christmas season. Christmas, of course, the birth of Christ. So why would you want to have this thing on your on the buses? What's the point?
Well, there are an awful lot of humanists out there, people who are agnostics and atheists who, you know, believe in goodness and have good values and so on, but, you know, they don't realize that there are others who are like them, who think like them, or that there's an organization that represents them. So we thought, hey, you know, we'll pick something catchy and we'll do it in a secular way. And we'll just refer to the idea of being good for goodness sake from a secular song of the holidays. And by the way, you'd mentioned St. Nicholas. Well, not really now. I mean, the Santa Claus image was created by Thomas Nast in the 1860s as a secularization for the holiday. It has a little to do with St. Nicholas. It has a little to do with Norse god Odin, and a whole lot of other things fed into that image.
Okay, well, that's swell. The concept is based upon St. Nicholas, as you know. Now,
no, it's not based only on that.
Yeah, no. Okay, fine. You just said, just be good for goodness sake. But then you have to throw in why believe in God. So that shows me that you're of the Bill Maher ilk, that you want to provoke, you want to be provocative, and, sir, you want to be insulting. Because you know, everyone knows that some people will be offended by that, particularly with the Santa Claus image and all of that. They'll say, you know, that's inappropriate, and it is. If you had just put, just be good for goodness sake, come to the humanist meeting or whatever you want these folks to do, I don't have a problem with it. But you want to give religious people jazz, Mr. Edwards. Why don't you just be honest about it?
Because we need to say to our people, hey, if you don't believe in a God, you do believe in being good for goodness sake, and so we're trying to identify our audience. Now, is it edgy? You bet it is. Is it cute and clever? Sure it is. Are people in Washington, D.C. who are used to all kinds of crazy and wild protests from all sorts of different sides and viewpoints, are people in Washington, D.C., are they likely to be offended by this? Local TV stations that have interviewed people on the street couldn't find anyone who was offended by this.
Maybe there's a, you know, in the city of Washington, D.C., maybe you won't find anybody. I don't know. I'm not offended by it because here. I'm not offended by it because I don't really care what you guys think. But I do believe you put the line in there to give people jazz. Now, are you like a missionary for atheists? Do you want to convert people to your humanist point of view? Because it would seem that that's what you want. You want to attract people's attention. You want them to contact your organization, and I guess you want to get as many humanists as you can. Is that correct? Is that the goal?
It took me a long time to become a humanist, a lot of thought and a lot of study, and most people who become humanists are the same way. It takes them a long time. If we were trying to convert people to humanists, first of all, it would take more than 2 sentences on the side of a passing bus to do it.
Why waste the 40 grand? Then why
because we're reaching our audience. We're saying to people who are already humanistically inclined, hey, we're over here. We're the American Humanist Association.
Do you want them to come to your house for Christmas dinner or atheist dinner, whatever dinner you have? Solstice dinner? What do you want to do? You want them to come and join you for a bigger club? You want to go to the game? What do you want to do?
Yeah, a bigger club of like-minded people to promote the values that we all share. So you're a lonely
guy? You need more humanists to come and be human with you? Is that what?
Well, I don't know. Are people lonely who go to church? I don't know. I mean, people go to church because they like to be with like-minded.
Do you want people to sign up and pay dues? I mean, what exactly do you want?
Yeah, we want them to sign up, pay dues, join with other people, make new friends.
Is this a
join their
business?
local growth? No, we're a nonprofit educational organization, and we discuss all kinds of interesting issues, some of the same kinds of issues you discuss on this show, all kinds of social
so
and
you
political
want to
ideas.
recruit people into your club, humanist club or organization, so you can just discuss stuff.
No, and we also have humanist charities. We're very active in issues like in Hurricane Katrina. We've had people down there with down on the ground helping people in that and all sorts of things.
Okay.
We do a lot of different things.
Look, I have no problem with you and your dopey sign. I think you wanted to provoke. I didn't like that. I think it was foolish and immature. If you want to attract attention with a positive message, be good for goodness sake. The humanists are here for you. I think people would have been curious about that, and they would have contacted you anyway. You didn't need the jazz. You didn't need the Bill Maher stuff.
No, it's a shrug. It's a rhetorical question. Why believe in a God? Just be good for goodness sake.
Okay, well, you better hope there's no God there, Mr. Edwards. Anyway.
I'm not worried.
We appreciate you coming on the program. We'll be right back.
After I said I'm not worried, he says, well, you don't look worried. And that was the way it ended. He like handed me that. It's like, wow. That was just great. So I had fun with that. And it didn't last long, but it got our point across. And that thing sat up on YouTube for quite a while before I think the O'Reilly show told them to take it down.
I'll be putting it back up.
Yeah. So that's when you think about what your message is and you know and have prepared, you can go on a show even like Bill O'Reilly, and it's not going to last very long, the interview, so you don't have to remain unflappable for very long when you're doing Bill O'Reilly. So it was pretty easy, actually. I had been earlier in the day on a radio talk show that was really much more difficult. I had a real hard-nosed talk show host, and I'll cover that and some of the techniques I used on that show. But actually, Bill O'Reilly was easy after that radio interview. So let's take a 10-minute break, come back here in 10 minutes, look at your clocks and be back here then, and we will get down into things. I'll have handouts for you, and we'll get down to the nuts and bolts. In regard to the Bill O'Reilly interview, I mentioned that I'd done an interview earlier the same day. I did that on the Laura Ingraham radio show.
Good
Okay, now, I walked into the studio and just took one look at her, and I thought, this is a mean lady. I had never seen her before. I'd never listened to her show. I hadn't seen her on when she pinch hit for Bill O'Reilly. I just took a look at her nature. She wasn't looking at me. When I came in, she didn't want to look at me. And she was deliberately difficult. So when we come to interview techniques, I'm going to cover some of the things she pulled on me and how I handled them. Because when you have a hostile talk show host, you still want to get your point across, and you can. All right, so let's start with the first part of the handouts that you've been handed. Right on the front, the message clarification worksheet. Now, the natural thing is, you want to ask, what exactly is your message? What is the main idea you're trying to get across? Now, you notice I only provide you with a little bit of space there. You have to say it in 1 or 2 sentences. Before you launch a campaign of any kind, before you do any publicity for your group, you have to have a clear idea in your mind what your message is. Because so often people say, stay on message, don't get off message. Well, you can't stay on message or avoid getting off if you don't have a message. It isn't just a matter of getting on TV and talking about our wonderful philosophy and ideas. It isn't just about getting on TV and radio and talking about your wonderful group and all the things it does. Nobody cares, okay? You have to have a message you're trying to get across. Now, I want you to understand something about the way media works, okay? Because in order to work the world the way you want the world to go, you have to know how the world works. So here's the way the media world works. No matter what anyone tells you, it's all about money. It's not, the wonderful free press and freedom of knowledge and the public's right to know and all these wonderful old bromides you'd heard about the news media. Yes, those ideals are taught in journalism college, and some people have actually tried to live by them. But the fact of the matter is that media is business. And if it bleeds, it leads. If it is exciting, if it's interesting, if it's visual, it makes good television. If it's controversial discussion, it makes good radio. If there's exciting pictures and challenging news stories, it makes good print media. What are they trying to do when they do this? When you watch a news program, what's the goal of the news program? It is to deliver viewers to sponsors. End of story. That's it. When you go on radio, what's the goal? Deliver radio listeners to radio advertisers. Read the newspaper. Deliver readers to the ads. Same way with the internet. No matter what it is, media is driven by money. It's driven by advertisers. That's why your newspaper is so cheap. That's why TV can be free. That's why radio is free, because it's all about the advertising. That's why the internet, you go to these websites, they have all these ads on it. That's the only way they can keep going. And the most popular websites are ad-driven. So, your job is to find where the interests you have of getting your message across intersect with the goal of those running the media of delivering audience to advertisers. And if you help that talk show host or that reporter get a hot story, it makes them look good in front of their boss. Their boss feels good because they got a great story. The advertisers feel good. The advertisers advertise more. They pay more money for the ads because they get more subscribers, they get more listeners, more viewers. So you're helping them do business. And in return, they're helping you get your message across. And they want a larger audience, but so do you. So it's in your self-interest to help them get larger audience and make more money. So give them exciting television, give them exciting radio, give them an exciting news story. Have an exciting message. That's...
Did you punch her?
What?
Did you punch her?
No, I did not punch her. I don't want that publicity. All right? Now, so what exactly is your message? Now once you know what your basic message is, then you flesh it out. Who, what, why, where, when, and how, the usual questions. And you really lay them down there, because many people who write newsletters or write op-eds for the newspaper or write letters to the editor or whatever, they need to have those details. It's very easy to forget a missing detail. So this is your worksheet. Don't fill it out now. Take it home, photocopy it, and use it. Every time you launch any kind of media campaign with your group, fill it out. You know, if you have a big name speaker coming to town, Richard Dawkins, you write Richard Dawkins next to the who. And that's really how you go about this. And sometimes it's the way you're doing it that's interesting. So you write down the how. Now, after you've done all that, then state the problem your message seeks to solve or resolve. You know that's what we're all about. We find things wrong with the world, we want to fix them, right? So, what's the problem? Why do we have this message that we have? How is it going to make the world better? That's where or our society better, or your local community better, or what's it going to do? State the problem your message seeks to solve or resolve. And then, what benefits does your message offer, or what results does it promise? In other words, can you deliver the goods? Okay, you're trying to address a real problem, but is it going to be successful? If people do what you want, what will happen? Will it be anything of any value? Will it be anything that anyone wants? You better have an answer to that, and you better be able to put it in the blank there. Turn the page. Now, you can fill out the whole first side of this page and still not have anything worth running a media campaign about, because there's nothing unique about your message. Me Too is not a powerful message. Oh, we're doing this also. That doesn't cut the mustard. So you need something unique about your message. But if you'll remember at the beginning of this seminar, I pointed out that we're in this sweet spot right now, where we're not so controversial as to be beyond the pale, but we're just controversial enough that people can't stop talking about us. One day we'll be mainstream and we won't be interesting. But right now, just because we don't believe in a God, we can get airtime, we can get news coverage, and so on. So, sometimes then, it's newsworthy when we do it. So sometimes the Me Too does work if it's us. So if you adopt a highway, that could be a news story. Atheists cleaning up trash on the highway could be a news story because they don't expect us to do it. And we can play off of that prejudice against us to do the unexpected, to do something nice and crow about it. Now, what are some really stupid objections to your message? Now, you don't have to look far to find stupid objections to whatever your message is when you're launching a campaign. Just read the letters to the editor section of your newspaper, read blog comments, whatever it is. There are plenty of stupid objections, but you need to know what they are, make a list of them, and have nice short answers for them. It's almost impossible to be prepared for every stupid thing they might throw at you, but you can answer the most common stupidities, because if you don't answer them, if you don't have a response, if you think responding to them is beneath you, people will think you don't know how to answer them, or you have no answer, that you were actually stumped by that stupid question. And you notice that I don't give you much space again. You're going to have to write see attached sheet on that one. And what are some really intelligent objections to your message? What really are the best arguments against your people and your ideas? Because if you go on a radio talk show, for example, they might, in order to balance your appearance, have you debate a Jesuit or somebody, and someone who's really good at this sort of thing, and you need to know what are the best arguments they can bring up, or that maybe your interviewer had done homework and knows what the best arguments are against your position. Now, you're not just arguing our philosophy, you're not just arguing atheism. You're arguing over, you're putting your points across based on what your campaign is. Now, as you notice from the billboard campaigns that I showed you, our message was, you are not alone. There are groups for you. That was our message. So, what are the objections that people could raise against us telling others where to find us? That's the kind of thing you're looking for whenever you go by your campaign, not by what your basic philosophy is, and you consider the stupid objections and the intelligent objections. Now, after you've done all of that, and you've gone through all this, you might want to restate your message because you might have modified it by this time. So restate your message briefly and keep it simple, and then do one of the hardest things for us to do. Find a way to then state the message in a positive way. Now, we've heard some lectures during this conference that address this point. I want to take it a little further. When Ralph Nader and others began becoming consumer advocates and saying that certain cars were unsafe at any speed and so forth, and challenging products for their lack of safety and so forth, they didn't say to the public, oh, you stupid, gullible people for buying these cars that don't work. Oh, you stupid people for taking these medicines that don't do anything. No, they were consumer advocates. They were saying, we're here for you to help you keep your money in your pocket or not buy something that will hurt you. So we're your friend, we're on your side. So that's the way you make our message positive, is you get shoulder to shoulder with the person you're trying to reach with the message and say, I'm not here to oppose you, I'm not here to call you names, I'm here to help you find better ways of solving your problems so that you are a smart consumer. And if you are a smart shopper, when you go shopping for religion, you will use reason and you will think about things. So always try to find a positive way to pitch your message, because so much of what we do is stop that, no, don't do that anymore, this is bad. And that applies not only to the free thought movement, it also applies to things like ending war and things like that, ban the bomb and all this stuff. All right, but what's the positive aspect of that? Well, the positive aspect of that is we want to bring peace. We want people to be able to grow up and have families and have reasonable lives and so on. So you want to find a way to get your positive message across so you can press that message. That's really key here. And that is sometimes difficult for us. So you might want to get a committee together and say, well, now how can we put this in the positive way? Now, what is the best audience for your message? Sometimes we want to think everybody is the audience for our message. But let's be honest. Messages have markets. Everything has a market. Everybody is not in the market for what we do. Not even every atheist or agnostic or humanist or freethinker is in the market for what we do, because people join groups based on what the group does. And if your group holds lectures and these atheists over here prefer football, they're not going to attend your lecture meetings, even if they agree with you on philosophy. So don't think that just because they're atheists, they should be in your atheist group, because they may not like what you do. So you define your group by what you do, and you project that image, and you look for the people who are in the market for what you do. And so you say, who am I trying to reach? Who is the best audience for what I'm doing? And what is the best media for reaching that audience? Where do these people congregate? What advertising do they read? What shows do they watch? Where do they go? Probably fundamentalist talk radio is not where you're going to want to go. It might be good practice in getting beat up on and building a few calluses, but it isn't useful for getting your message across to the right audience. Bill O'Reilly was different. There are people in our movement who are addicted to conservative talk show television, and they actually watch. And so when I was talking to Bill O'Reilly, I wasn't trying to convince him of anything, heaven forbid. I was trying to reach the atheists in his audience who needed to hear what I had to say. I was talking to them, I wasn't talking to him. I mean, I was talking to him sort of, but as bouncing it off him to them. And that's what you're doing, reaching your audience. So what's your message? What's the best audience for your message? Where is that audience? Are they Twitter people? Are they Facebook people? Are they website people? Are they library people? Are you looking for people who read old-fashioned books in old-fashioned libraries and print up a bunch of bookmarkers and put them in the kind of books they read and go into your library and infiltrate and put your bookmarks in there? All right. Then who are the best spokespeople for representing your message? It may not be you. Someone in your group may be really good. They may have this great photogenic presence. They may be great on television, and that's good. And there are other people who look really great on radio. And so you want to get the right people for the right media. And people need to learn to dress up for some of these things. I've seen some people get looking pretty scruffy. They think there's a sort of a badge of honor about wearing shorts and a dirty t-shirt. And you know, it's like, yeah, we're atheists. We have shorts and dirty t-shirts. And you don't have to dress like a Mormon or a lawyer, but really think about putting across a nice, laid-back, but neat message and image. Image does matter. So you look for the best spokespeople for your message, and if you are the spokesperson, ask yourself, what are your qualifications or experiences that make you a suitable spokesperson? Do you have some degree? Do you have some knowledge? Do you have some experiences? Are you the president of the group? Whatever it is, be clear about yourself. And that takes us to the next page, the talking point and soundbite planner, where we ask kind of the same questions to start out. What's your goal for this media appearance? All right, and it can't just be, oh, gee, I get to be on TV. It has to be, I have a message. I'm on a mission. You're not on a mission from God, but you're on a mission, okay? So be clear about your message and be clear about who you are. They're not going to ask you, who are you are, why are you here, and why is your message important? But you need to have a clear idea before you go on as to who the hell you are and why you are important and why your issue is important. And have a real good sense of your importance. Not a puffed up sense, just an honest sense of your importance so that you impart it with authority. And then, of course, how can you be reached? I mean, you can go on these shows or you can talk to these reporters or you can be interviewed and win the argument. And so what? If you didn't give the web URL or the name of the organization, or you don't have an organizational name that is Googleable. If you are the humanists of the west, east end of the greater Miami Valley, or the humanist, atheist, agnostics, and freethinkers of greater this or that, who's going to remember that? Come up with a short form of your name or an acronym, change your group's name or change the way you represent yourself to the public. You need a Googleable name so that people can type it in and find it. And that means check it on different computers or turn off the personal aspects when you do your Googling, and then you can find out what your, how Googleable your URL is or your group's name is. And you had a question, I think, right? Come up to the microphone so we can all hear you.
It wouldn't hurt to also buy that acronym that you're making.
Yes.
As your URL.
Yes, you should buy URLs and buy it in .com and .org. That's what we do. They're really cheap. They're not expensive. But put them in the hands of someone who will remember to renew them every year, because if you invest a lot in that URL and then somebody leaves the group who was in charge of it and it doesn't get renewed and all the renewal messages were sent to that person and that person doesn't care or they become born again or something, then you need to be sure that somebody trustworthy has the keys to the kingdom and will remember to and will take care of renewing the URL. Otherwise, I guarantee you, when the AHA ran that campaign, they took out the URL, whybelieveinaGod.org, okay? And I said to the AHA, now be sure to renew that one. They thought, well, we'll probably never use this again. All right, well, if you type in whybelieveinaGod.org, the pornographers have it now. So, so don't lose the URL, because that's the evangelicals or the pornographers will get it.
And I've rescued people from that, and because they were a nonprofit soccer kids stuff, they only got charged $300 to rescue the name. So
yeah, that's another thing. The ones who will take the names and then sell them back to you for a higher price, because there's a profit in URLs. If they decide that a web URL is useful and effective and that a lot of people want it, they will try to sell it to you. They tried to sell me a URL for one of the groups that we might one day form, and we just held out and didn't buy it, and finally they stopped trying to sell it and went into the public domain, and then we got it. Yeah. So sometimes you have to do that, other times you do have to pay. All right, so you want to be able to be found, and then so you want to be able to give contact information. So when you do these interviews, people need to find you. You notice we had the web URL on the Arizona billboard when you saw on the video there, and they zoomed in on it. That's the secret. You want that publicity. Interesting thing happened in San Diego when we launched their billboard. One TV station zoomed in on the web URL. Another one kept finding ways to show pictures of the billboard with bushes kind of half in the way, obscuring the URL on the billboard. So, yeah, you can't always, succeed in that. But if they state out loud the name, Coalition of Reason, you can be found. Google Coalition of Reason, you get our website, and you can find all the coalitions in our network. All right, then you want to have 3 campaign talking points. Now, these aren't the same as the long list of talking points that you use to answer the usual objections. These are 3 main parts of your message talking points. You just want 3. And whenever you go on radio and TV and talk to the press, you keep hitting these points. So when you're staying on message, it means you're going back to these talking points. A talking point is not word for word. A talking point is a basic idea which you can restate in numerous ways. So work out 3 main talking points. And then work out some sound bites that are creative. And you can use those sound bites either to foster your talking points, or you can use them to answer some of the usual objections. Case in point, we are often asked, how can you be good without belief in a God? And this is a trap for us. Not because it's a difficult question for us to answer, but we have so many answers for it. Oh, well, look at the chimpanzees. They have family values without benefit of clergy. And and there are these mirror neurons in our brain that cause us to identify with other people's pain. And that causes us to have the golden rule and all of this. And then there are practical cultural advantages to having these. And cultures found reasons. So we've got sociological arguments, we've got neurological arguments, we've got physical anthropology arguments, we've got philosophical arguments. Oh my gosh, we could spend all bloody day answering that question. don't do it. Not unless it's your message. What you do instead is you say, with a little soundbite, and a soundbite is word for word something memorable that you're going to say. You say, because if it is to be, it is up to me. No one's going to fix the world. I got to fix it myself. Life's a do-it-yourself job. That's why we are good without God. That's all the reason you need. Let them chew on that. They were looking for a philosophical argument. Don't give them one. Just say, if it is to be, it is up to me. It's very simple. It's very down to earth, and it rhymes. So, all right. So that's the sound bites and the talking points. Now, yes, go right ahead.
One of the other things with the sound bites is I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about how he does his sound bites, and he goes on the Jon Stewart show a lot. And anybody who watches The Daily Show knows that John gives a certain amount of time, then he makes a joke. Gives a certain amount of time, makes a joke. Now, he actually timed his shows to find out what the average time was and how long he had to speak before he was going to be interrupted. So he did the research ahead of time, and he had all these sound bites ready to go that would fit in those segments, so he can get his message apart in there before the next joke. And as soon as that joke was done, he was ready with his next sound bite. So it's important to know your target as well. Thanks.
Yes, do your research. I went on the Morton Downey Jr. show many, many years ago. Okay, you had to watch that show to believe it. That was a piece of work. It's a longer story, so I won't go into it, but the point is, you had to know the show. And the person who arranged to get me on the show had never watched the show. And then he called me back later after he'd watched an episode, and he says, "Oh, Fred, I'm so sorry that I got you on that show." Because it was all a game to him. I did get my point across, though, but for what good it did. All right, now, turn the page. We have general talking points for local coalition of reason media campaigns. And so you can see that we talk about 1, you are not alone. 2, you have non-theistic neighbors, that we're everywhere. And 3, public response to our efforts has been overwhelmingly positive. So when we do these billboards, some people think that we're gluttons for punishment, that we're putting a kick me sign on our rear. But we're not, because the response has been overwhelmingly positive. People are so grateful. Where have you been all my life? I thought I was the only one. We hear this all the time. So it becomes part of our message to explain that our message is well received and has been well received all over America. Sure, we get the negative emails. Most of them, though, are just amusing. I mean, it's people who are going to pray for you, or one person wrote to me, "Well, if there's no God, where do you think Adam and Eve came from?" Yes. Talk about stupid questions. All right. So, and then we have sub-points here, that all non-theistic groups are not alike.
What's the answer to that?
What's the answer? Okay, well, my answer is...
What's the approach?
Okay, that reminds me of my childhood. When I was first told there's no Santa Claus, I answered, "That's ridiculous. What would the elves do?" And so I can tell that story and just show by example how absurd it is. It's trading one myth for another. All right, so those are our general talking points for our campaigns. So you know what talking points look like now from that sheet. So when you come up with your campaign, whatever it is, this is the kind of thing you're trying to do. Now, let's switch over to press releases and press conferences. Now, I'm not going to take up a whole lot of time because we're running out of time, but I've provided you here with a model press, some basic guidelines on press releases, and I've provided you with a model press release and a model media advisory, which you can imitate, emulate, follow along, and so on. But the key in a press release to make it effective is, since we send press releases by email these days, then the headline on your press release is the subject line of your email. That means you have to grab the reporter in the amount of time it takes them to read the subject line of your email. So put some thought into that subject line. Because I've talked to reporters who have said they take pride in how many press releases they can delete unread per minute. So that means you just have those few seconds that it takes to read your headlines. So you try to do things like I've done here with some of these examples. National Day of Prayer versus National Day of Reason. That flags people that this is a National Day of Prayer story, but then you're offering verses. Who could be against a National Day of Prayer? That gets attention. And then National Day of Reason. What's that? Arouses curiosity, gets the email open. Celebrating the holidays without God, a humanist alternative, talking about the winter holidays. Again, people have never heard of this idea, so it's challenging. You can use strong language like humanists slam repressive taboos. Or you can use things that seem counterintuitive or opposites, like New Center launches secular Sunday schools. What could a secular Sunday school be? Aren't they opposites? And then, my favorite, New Center to teach godless ethics. Godless is golden. Use the word godless. Whenever I write these press releases for these billboards, I call them godless billboards. No one ever sends a reporter with the word godless in the headline. That's why it works so well. And we own the term. We're not ashamed of it. That shocks them. They're not expecting that at all. I once sent out a press release in Washington, D.C., where some people said, Fred, we're having a picnic, and we're going to have a lot of atheists there. Can you get some press out? And I said, no, there's no story here. You're having a picnic and there's an atheist present. Oh, Fred, you can do miracles. Go ahead, write a press release. So I did. I wrote, ungodly leaders to gather at picnic was my headline. And it got 2 reporters out. I mean, so these things can work. So be clever and counterintuitive. Write it in an Associated Press news story, which means you don't say in your press release, this is outrageous. Instead you say, Joe Blow, president of the atheists of whatever, said today, this is outrageous. You put it in quotes. Opinions are in quotes. You're writing an objective news story. That's AP style. And AP style also means you drop that last comma before the and you use word numbers for the first 10, and then after that you follow with numerals, and so on. Quotes in your press release, you're quoting people, you're telling a story, so you quote people, and your quotes should be short, pithy, and memorable. You send it out in plain text with no file attachments, and if you have file attachments or other materials, you have a link in the press release, and you post those things with your press release on your website. And you send the press to your website to get the documentation and the photos and all of that stuff. You can follow up with phone calls to pitch your story. And that's the way you do press releases. You do media advisories and for press conferences where you want to get the press to show up at something. And that's a little different. A press conference will last a half hour. A good publicity stunt to do is if some group you are opposed to is holding a big convention in town, rent a meeting room in that convention hotel or in the hotel across the street. The press are already there. And do your counter gathering and have a press conference in which you criticize everything they're doing across the street or in the same hotel. The press will show up. Even a small protest gets lots of attention. You don't have to have a whole lot of picketers to become part of somebody else's story. So that's a good trick to use. Now, although I said earlier, don't respond to others, let them respond to you. If they're doing something really gigantic and you want to work your way into the story, then you do respond to it, and it gets you into the news stream and into the story. Or you issue a press release as soon as their story comes out, and giving you a counter view. But that means you have to be really ready to respond. All right, so I won't go through the details of sample press releases. I'll just finish up here by the last page, page 11, TV and radio and print interview reminders. And the key thing here is you want to be attractive to the people you want to attract. You want to arrive early for radio, earlier than they tell you. TV, they will tell you when to arrive because they know they got to make you up and put you in the green room and all of that. If you're doing any public speaking, bring your short bio with you, because a lot of times people forget it, they don't have it handy, so always have an extra copy. Know who you're there to meet, because the receptionist doesn't know you from Adam or Eve, and they're doing multiple recordings or interviews or whatever. It's not all about you, so know who you're there to meet and be able to give names. Always carry brochures with you wherever you go on your group, because I've handed them to camera people. People from the control room will say, oh man, I love what you were saying, and they rush out of the control room, they want to talk to me. I've had the host sit down with me afterwards and say, yeah, you know, my family wants me to go to church, but I don't really believe this stuff anymore, and I'm doing a counseling session. So all kinds of things happen. Put your information on note cards so you don't rattle paper using the microphone. And dress appropriately and look good throughout. Of course, I said earlier, don't look at the TV monitor. It makes you look shifty-eyed. During the interview, if you do nothing else, give your group contact information and give it often. That's what you're there to do. You're not there to win the argument. You're there to get your talking points across and tell people where to go, where to find you. That's what you're doing. You're advertising. Don't lose sight of that. So always relate who you're with and why you're there, unless the host does it for you, as they often do on radio talk shows. And listen carefully to each statement and question when it's being asked. Don't just be so much in mind of what your talking points are that all you're thinking about is how you want to say what you want to say. You do all that studying ahead of time and be ready. And then when you go on the show, do like the Buddhists say, live in the present moment. And pay attention to the damn question and listen. You will be ready to respond once you hear the question correctly. If you miss the question, it could screw up the rest of the interview for you. When responding, begin with a short answer that's to the point and then elaborate. So often in our movement, we're so intellectual, we say, we want to give the whole past history of the question before we answer it. Say, well, you know, the other side says this. And they argue it this way, and it is very persuasive. Okay, thank you, and they go ask the next question, and you just stumped for the other side. Don't want to do that. You want to give the conclusion. As I always say, pretend you are a creationist. Start with your conclusion first, and then work back to your evidence. All right, so that's the way you do it. It's the way they do it in newspapers. They give the present story first and work back to the past. You're not building a logical argument. You are not writing a scientific paper. You are doing public relations. Give the answer and then show why it's the answer. And find every excuse to move to one of your talking points. When asked a direct question, don't dodge it. Answer it, but answer it briefly before moving to a talking point. And don't pull a Sarah Palin. Don't say, that isn't the question I came to answer. This is the question I came to answer, and then start interviewing yourself. No, they don't like that. And don't be like politicians are, dodging questions. People hate that. Don't do it. But you can always segue to a talking point, because after you answer the question, you can say, but the real question is, and then you can move to that. And once you've covered your talking points on like an hour-long radio show, cover them again in different words, because people are tuning in all the time. And if you're doing a TV interview and they're going to edit it later, like it's for a newscast, and they say, okay, well, we got plenty of memory in the camera. Go ahead and talk to the camera and talk about anything you want. No, do not fall for that. Because then you'll say, oh, and by the way, we need to get in God We Trust off the money. And then next thing you know, you watch the evening news and find out that your campaign is all about getting in God We Trust off the money. And whatever your real talking points were, never get mentioned. They're on the cutting room floor. Don't give them anything. Talk to the camera like they ask you to, but go back over your talking points again and again until they're tired of hearing them. All right. Avoid digressions into side issues. Stay on message and keep to your points. Don't get into a tangent of these other things. Now, if you're on an hour-long talk show, you'll have a little more luxury to get into tangents, and it's sometimes a good thing to do because you can take the opportunity to explain things. But keep coming back to your talking points. Avoid the sort of detail that belongs in essays and lectures. Essays go on your website, lectures go at your meetings. Eliminate complexity in what you say by focusing on simplicity. So think about this ahead of time. How can I state my message in simple language that anyone can understand? And don't assume that the lingo in our movement is understood by ordinary people. It is not. Here's a story. Herb Silverman, in a restaurant. He wears t-shirts with slogans. You know Herb Silverman. All right. And he was in this smorgasbord type restaurant. And someone saw one of his, humanist t-shirts with a slogan on it and said, well, I see you're in the insurance business. And he says, how do you figure I'm in the insurance business? He says, well, because of the slogan on your shirt. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Yeah, we live in different worlds with many people in our audience. They don't know that thing. We know that thing. We talk like that. But it's not the same with others. So try it out on some of your religious friends, enemies, and neighbors and relatives, and see if they understand what you're talking about. Aim to keep your answers positive. Remember I talked earlier about finding a way to state your message positive. Always try when you're being interviewed to make your message positive. But do be prepared to counterattack directly whenever necessary. You can let them beat up on you a little bit to show that you're long-suffering and patient. But people don't admire you being too long-suffering and patient, so they want you to show a little gumption and fight back too. But don't create new openings in the way you do that, because then they'll just use those to attack you. Now, never repeat negative statements made by others. Go right to your answer. So if they say, well, why is it that you atheists hate God? Hate God? We atheists don't hate God. How can you hate God if you don't believe in God? No, we don't hate God. We just don't believe in God. How many times did I say hate God? How many times did I reinforce the wrong idea by repeating the falsehood? Never repeat the negative. Just say nonsense. And then go to your answer. That's the easiest way to do that. Now this is the one that Laura Ingraham pulled on me throughout an hour-long radio show. She pulled the trick of the triple questions. She said, now answer me this. And while you're at it, I want to know this. And by the way, what about that? Okay, now the idea was to get me to be chasing my tail, trying to answer all three questions at once or to confuse me or what have you. Didn't work, because I knew what to do. When they ask you three questions, pick one. It's multiple choice. You get to choose which question you answer. And you don't make reference to the other questions. You don't say, I can't possibly answer all three, I'll just do this one. No, just pick one like it was the only question you were asked, and then answer it directly. I guarantee you they'll never come back at you and ask the other two questions. And she didn't. She went to three new questions. And then I answered one of them. And she went to three new questions. We did that for an hour. I listened to the recording afterwards. And every time I was speaking, I was intelligently answering a question directly. That was what I wanted to get across. And she was looking like an asshole. So it worked out beautifully. So that's the way you handle it. Yes?
What was the purpose, in your view, of her doing that repeatedly? What was she trying to achieve?
She was trying to stump me, trap me, make me look stupid, make me trip over my tongue, fall all over myself. Yes?
What's wrong with that, with like dismissively asking, or I guess demanding that she just ask one question?
No, don't get into a fight with them over their method. Just go with the flow if you can. If you start criticizing the way they run their show, you sound petulant. You sound like a whiner and a complainer. And they will attack you for that. So don't play into that. Just go with it. Because look, who are we talking to? Are we talking to her followers who love everything she says? No, we can't reach those people. They are lost causes, okay? They're not our audience. Our audience will respect us for answering the questions directly and handling that situation. And by the way, even if you screw up on a radio talk show, you go on and you don't really do a good job, there's two kinds of things that will happen from our allies. if you do a really good job, they'll call you up and say, wow, you really kicked ass. That was great. And if you don't do so well, they'll say, wow, that host was so unfair to you, I'm going to give you money. So in some ways, you can do no wrong. But it still works better to do well in this way. Now, there's the question.
Your point in that if you attack the host has final control over what is shown or heard on a program, and they will highlight your attack against that.
That's right. They can replay it or whatever. And not only that, they have a switch. They can turn off your microphone.
Well, I mean, but that's the problem, though. Could they do the exact same thing, just say, oh, this guy wouldn't answer all my questions?
They could, and they might. They could do anything they want after you've gone. But if you've put in a good show, and you have something then that you can link to on your website, and that's the other thing. Whenever you do a show, and whenever you get news coverage, you put it on your website, because that's the as seen on TV, or as heard on radio, or as read about in the newspapers type thing. You put links to the good stories. And if you don't like the way an interview turned out, but it is posted online, okay, so don't link to it, but list it. I was on that show. Okay, so if I'd done lousy on Bill O'Reilly, I'd still be telling everybody, I went on Bill O'Reilly. Okay, because just showing up is something to crow about. Just being asked to be on the show is something to show about. It's an honor just to be nominated. All right, so put that stuff on your website. Every media hit you get for everything you do, so that you become famous and your website becomes famous. When asked the wrong question, answer it directly and then move to a talking point. And here's the beautiful thing. When asked something you don't know, say you don't know. It's not my specialty. Oh, we have someone in our group who's better at that and they're speaking at this weekend's meeting. Or, oh, that's one of those great cosmic mysteries. And you know, the nice thing about being one of us is we know how to live comfortably with uncertainty. And you turn your inability to answer into a virtue. So, take advantage of that. Finally, keep track of time so you can end on a strong note. On radio talk shows, they say they end on the hour or the half hour. They don't. They end a few minutes before that. Find out from the host when it's really ending. Watch the clock. When you start hearing that music in your ear, it means they're about to cut you off, so that you can finish strong or give the web URL for your group or whatever you need to do. And then after the interview, however it all went, express thanks, be cordial and courteous, make notes on the people you interacted with, swap business cards, and learn when the show will air or how it's accessed online afterwards, so that you can list it on your website and talk about it. So spread the word. All right, any additional questions before we wrap up here? Or comments? Yes?
I just want
All right, go ahead.
I just want everybody to turn back to page 10 for a second.
Page 10.
This is part of the sample press release that Fred doesn't have the time to go over the whole press release, but I want you to notice a few things about this. Do you notice those 2 rows of hash marks there? These are the kind of details that if an editor or a reporter doesn't see these type of things, these are part of what makes it a professional press release. It's just going to go right in the trash. He's going to click delete, or she's going to click delete, and your press release is gone. This is the structure of a press release is just as important as what's actually being said in it, because if nobody sees it, it doesn't matter what you say. So do some research online about how to write press releases and about that. The hash marks are important to include. That's part of the press releases, those hash marks. He didn't put those in there just because it separated some points. Those are a journalistic thing.
What do they indicate?
I'm not sure why they. Are you sure?
Yeah, it's just it signals them that there's detailed information, to be found that you need to know. So that you need to know certain of the background details. That's what signals that you provided complete background details.
But also look like on page 9, you'll go there. You'll see the second line says for immediate release. These are, you have to know where to put these things.
Right.
In the press release. So do your research online. There's plenty of places out there online. When I was learning to do press releases, I had to learn on my own. And find these places that teach you how to do a press release and tell you why you're doing these in a certain way and how to order these. And then you can compare them to the examples you were giving here and see why Fred wrote the way he did.
Well, and by the way, a quick note before I take that one. I would quick note that the rules on press releases do change with time. It used to be that you would, for example, put the contact person right at the top of your press release, but now more and more they want the story at the top, and then when they want to know who to contact, they know to scroll down and find the information at the bottom. But notice that I've got bulleted items in there with asterisks. More and more they like bulleted items now in their press releases, so that's a new characteristic I've been adding to my press releases. But yes, you need to stay up on things on the way that goes. All right, you had something.
Yes, these are excellent points. I went to graduate school for media training in the dark ages back in the early 80s. I'm sure I'm a dinosaur. But to hear people talk about these things and the importance, I am confused because I must say, we have a generation that is putting spelling and grammar mistakes into headlines from AP and UPI announcements that go out all over the web. In addition to that, when I learned media back in the early 80s, all we had was hard copies. Now we have the internet, so formatting isn't exactly the same as it once was. There was a time the hash marks were -30. That's what you put at the bottom to say, So how important are these things? We have a generation now that is running the editorial desk within a publication or a website or whatever, who say things to me like, we don't care anymore.
Well,
I've heard that.
And the rules do change. And so oftentimes what they do is there's oftentimes articles posted online about what are the top techniques for making your press release better read. And you need to keep up on those things and read those articles. Oftentimes they come up on, some of these web networks that you can be on. What's that one I'm on? The business one.
LinkedIn? Business Wire?
LinkedIn oftentimes posts articles on interesting stuff. So since I'm in PR, I get all these LinkedIn articles on PR techniques and how to make your website more viewable and so on. Just stay up on that stuff and read the articles in the field. But this will get you started. If you follow the model of the press release followed and you just put your information in a similar fashion and in this same order, you'll probably be okay. Because even amateurs who send out press releases that aren't quite right, if the story is good enough, they will sometimes look past that. I have seen some crappy press releases get some big press, but don't you be the one to try that.
Are you still supposed to put who, what, when?
Yeah, it's best, that's what we say. Be sure you know the answers to those questions.
The title and the slug, that's what I learned. Between the title and the slug, you should get who, what, when, where. I have seen titles and slugs coming out of PR Newswire that repeat the exact same thing.
Yeah, and I don't recommend that. And so if you look at my press release, I've got that kind of information in there. But you need to know the answers because if they call you and interview you over the phone, and that's the other thing, a lot of times the reporters will call you and they'll start talking to you and ask you a few questions. And if you hear a typing sound on the other end of the phone, they're typing every word you say, or typing notes. So now you are really being interviewed without being told you're being interviewed. You need to answer the questions. You're probably going to be quoted. Speak clearly in complete sentences and get across your point. And that's why you do the preparatory message clarification worksheet before you write your press release, so you know what you're doing when you're interviewing. Yes?
When the Baltimore Coalition of Reason launched in 2009, media went pretty well. You'll remember we got a front page story in the Baltimore Sun. We got a spot on WJZ 13, and we also had a long form piece on the Dan Roderick show, where it was you and Karen Elliott and the president of the UMBC Secular Student Alliance. And I was really, the advice that you're giving is for short form, short interviews, and so you stay on message. But What about if you get on like a public radio talk show, you get a couple of those, and so you're on for like a half hour?
Or an hour. I've been on 2 hours. Sometimes they'll say, this was going so great. We've been having so much fun. Can you stay another hour? I've had that happen.
So yeah, so do you have any advice? Now, of course, there, we had you. What do we do if we don't have you?
Well, then you find someone who's knowledgeable to get on the show who can talk your ear off about all this other stuff. So long as they do the basic stuff first and get the sound bites across, get the talking points across, get the message across, and keep coming back to the message. Then if you're given all this extra time, now you can do all this extracurricular stuff and have fun with it and keep it interesting and keep people listening. But keep coming back to your talking points. So you're still baiting the hook with all of this other stuff. And so long as you keep it entertaining and it's good radio, the talk show host will keep you going because you're delivering audience to advertisers. And if you keep a lively call-in thing going, that's great. They love that stuff. So you do need to have people who know the answers and can think on their feet. And I'm not the only one. Yes?
I have a mistake, so for everyone to learn from and for you to add any lesson I should learn that I didn't yet. I once was asked, this past winter, I got an email to be on a talk show, and I said yes, and they said great, just answer these questions, right? And they said we're going to book you a satellite studio for the place, and I took the questions, and I had to run to work, and I wound up spending 12 hours before I got them back. And then it turned out that I wasn't on the show because they weren't going to, they were sending out apparently to numerous people, and they needed those answers to those questions before they knew if they would actually book me.
Oh, I see.
And so I learned from that experience that if you get questions, if you're told you're being asked to be on a show, make sure you immediately give the producers whatever you want, and whatever they want immediately, because they may not be counting on you until they know.
That's right, and I think it's a good point. It's also, too, that sometimes they might need you on that show in a big hurry, and they need you to respond right away so they know that you're responsive. So, yeah, don't hang around and hold on to those things too long. Get back to these reporters right away, and if you can't be the one to get back to them, have someone else who can do it. You need to have backup media people. Yes?
Well, that was my point. Before you send out the press release, make sure you're dressed and ready to go out the door immediately. Have a backup person that's also prepared to be called at a moment's notice to fill in for you. My bad story was I got so comfortable after the 4th or 5th interview following the release of the billboard in San Diego that I just started talking off the cuff to one guy, and I said something about atheists. It's not like we're all walking around with trench coats. Well, you know exactly what line made it into that news article. And then finally, you said something about protesting. I show up, and I am sometimes the only person with a sign at a Christian or a pro-religion rally or a pro-not-our-issue kind of thing. And because the news people want controversy, they make it look like have brought a whole counter-protest to the event, because all it takes is one picture of me with my sign next to the 300 that showed up for the other side.
Yeah, and you're the mouse that roared, and it works beautifully. Yes, you should do those things whenever you can. That's a good point. And yes, anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of public opinion. So do watch what you say. I remember once I was testifying at a textbook hearing in, I think it was in Buffalo, yeah. And they were claiming that secular humanism was in the social studies textbooks. And so I stood up and I said, look, I've looked at these textbooks. I'm a humanist. There is no humanism in these textbooks. And by that I meant nothing unique and specific to humanism. Yeah, humanists may agree with what's in the textbooks, but this is not humanism. I'm a humanist and I know. So they had the cameras on me, and that was great. And while I was talking, some asshole stands up, and some fat guy with a beard stands up and says, why don't you fundamentalists go bang your Bibles somewhere else? Guess who got on TV that night? He did, because he was more flamboyant. At first it was interesting that I was saying I was a humanist and talking about the issue. They didn't have anyone else in the audience doing that. So I was the standout guy until that guy did what he did. So therefore, keep your troops in line, people, okay? That's another thing to remember. Now, I didn't even know who that person was, so you can't control all of the factors, but do keep in mind that they want drama. They want excitement. They want adventure. They want to show that there was a big fight that happened at the school board meeting. So you need to give them something exciting and interesting. And I'd like to close on this note. There was this Unitarian minister in Amherst, New York, a suburb of Buffalo, who, as a regular part of his sermons, he would hand something out to the congregation, just kind of as part of his sermon, some little token that he would hand out as a regular thing. Well, he was preparing a sermon, and this was at the beginning of the AIDS controversy, when people were learning more about AIDS and what to do about it and so on, and how important it was to wear a condom and so on, and how condom advertisers couldn't get their advertisements on television. So he was going to give a sermon on the importance of the condom and fighting AIDS. And he was going to hand out condoms in his church. No one had ever done this before. He sent a press release to the news media saying, I'm going to give a sermon on AIDS and hand out condoms in church. I went to that church that Sunday morning. The news media from around the world was there. There were, in the balcony, there were cameras lined up there and pointing down at there. There were photographers in the front pews. My wife and I were sitting in the second pew. He went to hand out, after he got to the part of the sermon where he's handing out the condoms, Reverend Carl Tichenor, then he handed out, he went to hand out the first condom to the first person, and it turned out to be a photographer, and she's going, snap, 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 getting all these pictures of the condom in his hand. And then he finally gets a little disgusted, and he says, take a condom, not a picture. And everyone laughed, and then he passed out more of them. And it was just a gigantic news story. They had radio people there interviewing people as they were leaving. They had Christian protesters outside the church. It was fabulous. And it really put the issue of AIDS and condoms and the Unitarian Church on the map big time. So think creatively, think outside the box. If your friends and relatives would really humiliate you for doing it, you've probably got a good idea. So just be thinking about those things and try not to talk it to death or hone it down. And one other thing to remember, you're trying to get across a simple message, not a philosophical abstract concept. I've had people come up with ideas for bus ads or billboards that were abstract concepts, like, and I think David Silverman did one of these ones, where you show different gods and then you put circles with a line through them and cross those out, and the message is, we just believe in one less God than you do. All right, that's an abstract concept. It isn't going to work. You're not trying to inform people of ideas like that. Don't work for advertising billboards and bus ads and things. People look at that and they don't get it. They don't have time to figure it out. They don't understand. It's lingo we talk. We all understand it. We get it at a glance. But the rest of the world is confused by that. So don't try to deal in abstractions. Try to deal in concrete simplicity. My favorite billboard of all time was from Hill and Hill Gin. All right? And they just had block letters on the billboard. Showed a picture of their gin and the words, like Hill. That was it. And it just stood out, just caught my eye, and I'd seen their advertisements before, so I recognized Hill and Hill Gin, and I saw, like Hill. And we're just supposed to like their gin, plays on the like Hill. And and I still remember, I didn't buy any, but I still remember it after all these years. And Disney did something interesting in Los Angeles, where they have lots of billboards in Hollywood and Los Angeles. And they were advertising the movie Toy Story 3. So they just showed an image of one of the Toy Story characters. In this case, it was Buzz Lightyear, with a kind of a goofy look on his face and the number 3 next to it. That's all you needed to get the point across. And that's all a billboard can do. That's effective billboard advertising. But what we're doing with billboards is publicity stunts. We send press releases about them, and we launch our coalitions with them very effectively all the time. Thank you.